For those of you worshiping with us at home today, we're glad that you're here with us. We'd invite you to gather your supplies for communion, that we might celebrate that meal together. In the meantime, those of us that are gathered here, let's stand and sing All My Hope on God Is Found. We're in week 4 of our kind of summer look at the life of David, King David of the Old Testament. We looked at his calling by the prophet Samuel, his little altercation with Goliath, and last week we kind of looked at his relationship with Saul, a very complicated relationship with Saul, who had been king when David was a young man. So we've jumped ahead in the story. Saul has been killed in battle, and it is time for David to take over the kingship, which he had been prophesied that he would do by the prophet Samuel. That's why these books are called 1st and 2nd Samuel. All the Israelite tribes came to David at Hebron and said, "Listen, we are your very own flesh and bone. In the past, when Saul ruled over us, you were the one who led Israel out to war and back. What's more, the Lord told you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will be Israel's leader." So all the Israelite leaders came to the king at Hebron. King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 40 years. He ruled over Judah for 7.5 years in Hebron, that was the capital at the time, and he ruled 33 years over all Israel and Judah in Jerusalem, which became the new capital. David occupied the fortress, so it was renamed David's City. David built a city around it from the earthen terraces inward. David grew increasingly powerful, and the Lord of heavenly forces was with him. So the first few years of his rule, another town had been the capital of the nation. Jerusalem was under the control of an entirely different group of people, and David is able to capture that. I think we look at that here in a week or two. So as it dawned on me this morning, and it is 7/11, July 11th, I don't think there's any significance to that other than it's just kind of fun to say, and I've obviously enjoyed saying it. But over the last few weeks, Melody and I have noticed that we've been getting a lot of memory reminders. Hers are popping up on Facebook, and I hadn't really told her about it, but my photo gallery on my phone does the same thing. It'll send me an alert that said, "Hey, 5 years ago you were here, 7 years ago you were here." And it turns out that this last part of June and the first few weeks of July, we have taken a lot vacations. So Mel will send me a message on Facebook, and it'll be a picture of our family. I know one of them was in Yosemite. Several times that we've been in Colorado. And in fact, just this morning as I was driving into work, I got the alert that 3 years ago today, July 11th of 2018, we were at Bear Lake. The Bear Lake, Nymph Lake is a stream. I think this is that hike that you go up out in Colorado. So that's where we were 3 years ago today. It also turns out that the last week of June for the last 5 or 6 years has been when I've been at camp at Tall Oaks, either with Josh or with Adam, as Adam has become a counselor. It's also the 4th of July, right? So sometimes we're at Grandma's house in Herman. So just a lot of fun memories around this time of the year. Now this is also, we are in the middle of the 3 weeks of the year every summer when my family makes fun of me for watching the Tour de France. Now this becomes even more obvious when we are traveling together and we maybe only have one television, and I'm trying to watch 4 hours of a bicycle race, and they're not really very interested in that. So this has been going on for some time. I think probably, started way back with, we won't talk about Lance Armstrong today much, if that may be the only reference. But remember, he was the guy that won it 7 times in a row after he had cancer, and then it turns out he was cheating, and okay. So, but I got really fascinated by the sport, and if you don't, it's very complicated. And so that's why it takes kind of I don't know, what part of my brain kicked in on that, but it's just very interesting to me to watch. So they're just finishing the 2nd week of the race. So if you don't know anything about this, Tour de France is a professional bicycle race. It's the kind of the most famous and the most important of the races of the year. It lasts for 3 weeks. They ride 2,000 miles. And with a few rest days, it's basically 100 miles a day, and they average around 25 miles an hour. Now, on my absolute very, very, very best day on a flat surface, I can ride 15 miles an hour on my best day. These guys ride 25 miles an hour average speed over flat and up and down mountains. They climb mountains in the Alps and the Pyrenees. The top sprint speed of someone just riding just flat out on a flat surface, 48 miles an hour. One of the top recorded speeds on a descent coming, so after you climb up the mountain, you get to go down the other side, wearing a helmet and basically your pajamas, right? Because they're not wearing any padding. They're wearing just the most, aerodynamic things they can wear. 80 miles an hour on a bicycle going down the side of a mountain, right? So that's crazy. So here's a couple of pictures of what this looks like. So here's your word for the day. If you don't remember anything else, 7-Eleven. If you don't remember anything else, Peloton. So what is that thing that is advertised all the time as an exercise bike? Well, Peloton is the French word that refers to the main body of the racers in a bicycle race. So the Tour de France started 2 weeks ago with 184 riders from 23 different teams. And they're down about 50 already from people who have gotten injured or dropped out just from exhaustion. So the Peloton, they ride most of the time together. 100, 150 riders. Understand that that's why they're able to maintain a 25 mile an hour speed. It works kind of like the geese. The aerodynamics of a large group of bicycle riders allows them to ride much faster and easier than they would if they were by themselves. So here's a shot of the Peloton from the front. You can see way off in the distance, see all the little colors? Those are helmets. Those are more riders. So the next picture here is, I don't remember, here's a picture of the Peloton climbing up the side of a mountain. That looks like a pretty easy climb. How can I tell that they're still together? Right? So when the climb gets really rough, then it looks like this picture, which is them climbing up the side of a mountain in a rainstorm, by the way, and they get much more spread out. And the ones that can climb, and the ones who can't just kind of stay in the back and try to finish for the day, right? I mean, it is a major athletic achievement just to finish the stupid thing. 2,000 miles just to get there, right? So that is a pretty amazing thing. Now, what makes it so interesting to watch, at least to me, is there is all kinds of strategy going on all the time. Because there's about 6 different races that are going on at the same time. Okay, so here are 4 of them, and I'll explain 2 more. So the main competition is the yellow jersey, and that's general time classification. So it's easier if I look over here, isn't it? So the yellow jersey is the overall leader of the race, the one who has gotten the best time each day in a combination. And so from day 1, whoever is leading the race gets to wear the yellow jersey. Okay, so that's the main leader, that's the superstar, that's the one that you want to be. The green jersey is the person who's the best sprinter. So from time to time during the race on a flat section, they'll have a place where they say, if you get to that flag first, you get 10 points. And if you get to that flag first, you get 20 points. And if you finish the race first, you get 30 points. And so they go that by points. Mark Cavendish is the guy who had ridden 48 miles an hour on a flat surface, just pedaling, right? So he gets the green jersey. The polka dot jersey is the best climber. So the same thing happens with the points on the mountains. So they say, if you get to the top of this mountain first, you get 20 points, and if you're second, you get 10, and if you're third, you get 5. So here they are, rushing to get up the side of the mountain. And the white jersey is for the best young rider. So if you're under 25 and you have the best overall time, then you get to wear the white jersey. Okay? So these are individual competitions. There's also whoever wins the day, that's a big deal. If you win a stage in the Tour de France and you're a bike professional cyclist, huge. Like, you're famous for the rest of your life. You'll never have to buy a beer again in your hometown because you won a stage on the Tour de France 20 years ago. And then there's a team competition that they almost never talk about because it's not that interesting. So what's fascinating to me is this is an individual race competed as a member of a team. So you're on the team, and if you finish first, you win. It's like Mahomes throws a touchdown to Travis Kelce, and Kelce gets 6 points. And then the kicker gets 1. And Salvador Perez gets 4 points if he hits a grand slam, but the team doesn't. So it's this kind of strange thing. How are you on a team, and yet it's an individual competition? So the other members of the team, when they have somebody who's doing really well, it's their job to help them do that. And so they're called domestiques, which sounds like domestic, which sounds like servant. So you get 8 guys on a team. Let's say you have the yellow jersey. And what's the next picture there, Adam? I think this is a shot. So here's a shot of the peloton. This is the starting of the race. The car's not normally there, but the car's just driving along before they're just about to start the race. Middle of your picture is the yellow jersey. And what you can't see is that each of the teams is sponsored by a company. A lot of them are. So this guy's jersey is because I know what it says Saxo Bank on it. And to his right and to his left are other riders whose jerseys say Saxo Bank. And guess what? They're going to spend all day, that day, next to him, in front of him, and behind him. If he needs a drink of water, they're going to go back to the team car and bring him a water bottle. If he needs something to eat, they're going to get it for him. If he has a flat tire, one of those guys is going to get off his bike, give his bicycle to the yellow jersey so he doesn't lose any time. If the yellow jersey gets really tired and he falls behind the group, the team is going to go back and get him and provide him the the geese, right? Provide him the aerodynamic help. They're going to do everything they can to help the yellow jersey. So that's yellow jersey. Here's a shot of the white jersey, who's kind of in the middle left, and look at all the red jerseys in front of him and behind him. That's his team. They're going to spend all day doing that. They're going to make sure that he is protected He's never going to be in front because that guy's most likely to run into something. He's never going to be in the back because that's where the wrecks happen and 45 guys end up all, bicycles mangled. They're going to keep him protected all the way through the race. And then the next one is for a sprinter, and this is fascinating to watch. This is called a sprint lead out. So there's the green jersey, that's the sprinter, that I'm not sure who that is, but that'll be the fastest guy on their team for a short distance. So the other three guys are gonna ride in front of him. The guy in front is gonna ride as hard as, they're almost to the end, right? Sorry, I'm geeking out. They're almost to the end of the race. They've been riding for 4 hours. Maybe they went up and down a couple of mountains. I would be dead by now. But now they're gonna ride as hard as they can. So the guy in the front is going to ride as fast as he can for as long as he can, and when he gets tired, he's going to pull off. And the next guy is going to dig as hard as he can, as fast as he can, as long as he can, and then he's going to pull off. And the one right in front of the green jersey is going to be the main lead-out guy, and he's going to be the second fastest guy on the team, and he's going to kill himself until they get 100 yards away from the end. And the green jersey is going to slingshot around him, Ricky Bobby, right? Talladega Nights. There's a little NASCAR here. He's going to slingshot around him and go and win the competition. And all the other guys just go get on the bus, right? Right? They literally give everything they have physically to make sure that the guy on their team wins. It's just fascinating. And so all of this is going on at the same time. Green jersey, yellow jersey, polka dot jersey, white jersey. How's the team doing? Who's going to win the competition today? Oh, that guy's 15 minutes ahead of us. Well, we don't care because he's 2 hours behind in the race, right? In the mountains, the sprinters are 20 minutes behind the rest of the people because they don't care. There's no sprint today. Take it easy. Have a snack while I'm riding. It's so focused and so, it's just fascinating to me. That's why I find it interesting to watch. So at the end of the race, typically there's only one member of each of these 8. It would be a miracle to just, out of 184 riders, to be one of the top 3 on the podium in Paris at the end. So if you get one guy on your team that's either first, second, or third in any of those competitions, that's huge. You had a successful season, you had a great team, your sponsor will be happy because the name of their bank will be on TV, right? And your job was just to help them get there. Get no attention, get no applause, but you were the one that made it happen. In fact, just this week I heard the announcer talk about the team members of the yellow jersey taking care of him, and he said, the team will shepherd him today throughout the race. Make sure he's fine. The team will shepherd the one. So in the text today, it says that David, taking over as king of Israel, was to be the shepherd of Israel. The one shepherd taking care of the sheep. A whole different model than the many taking care of the one. And yet when we look back a little earlier, maybe it's not as different as we think. Because remember, Saul was the first king over the united 12 tribes of Israel. They never had a king before. And Samuel is in conversation with God. And Samuel keeps saying to God, Samuel the prophet, keeps saying to God, the people tell me that they want a king, and God says, I am their king. I have been their king. I'm the one that brought them out of slavery in Egypt. Why do they need a king? And Samuel says, well, they want a king because everybody else has one. Right? Everybody else got a king. We don't have a king. We want a king. And also because of the danger that they were experiencing from those other nations as they were trying to share the same space, which doesn't work out very well. So God finally says to Samuel, this is how the king will rule over you. He will take your sons and will use them for his chariots and his cavalry and as runners for his chariot. He will use them as commanders of troops of 1,000 and troops of 50, or to do his plowing and his harvesting, or to make his weapons or parts. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, or bakers. He will take your best fields, your vineyards, your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will give 1/10 of your grain in your vineyards to his officials and servants. He will take your male and female servants along with the best of your cattle and your donkeys and make them do his work. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and then you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out because the king you chose for yourselves. But on that day, the Lord will answer you. But the people refused to listen to Samuel and said, "No, there must be a king over us so that we can be like all the other nations. Our king will judge us and lead us and fight our battles." It kind of sounds like a giant team of cyclists supporting the one guy in Jerusalem or wherever, right? There's the many trying to support the work of the one. And we see Saul, through some faults of his own and maybe not being the right person for the job, doesn't really take care of the people that we know of. He's very successful in battle, but so is David. So what happens? When David takes over from Saul, the king the people don't like, to David, the one that they love, is he their shepherd? Is he the one that really cares for them, or do they continue being the ones who care for him? So we have in the text evidence that he definitely takes care of the military protection, defending the people. He fights a lot more battles, like the ones that had happened during Saul's life. They eventually reach some kind of peaceful setting there in Israel. They're able to capture the city of Jerusalem, make that their capital. So there are definitely things that David does to defend and protect. But it occurred to me that the job of the shepherd is kind of two things. It's the defend and protect, but it's also to feed and nurture, to care for. The domestique going back to get a bottle of water for the yellow jersey, to literally feed them, to protect them. Did David do that type of thing for his people? We don't really have a lot of evidence of that. We know that he protected them as a kind of military leader. But was there feeding and nurturing? It's hard to be a shepherd of human beings. There's so many things that you need to be responsible for. We have two models of what being a good shepherd is like. Of course, in the 23rd Psalm, we have the words of God being our shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. The feeding and nurturing. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, the protection and the defending, that we believe in God as our shepherd. It wasn't too long ago that we looked at the image of Jesus as shepherd in the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John. Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I know my own sheep, and they know me." So we see the model of God as shepherd, but Jesus as shepherd then. But what about human beings trying to take care of one another? What does that look like? Now, in the biblical story, after pretty much setting up this story where we have Samuel, who is the prophet, the one who speaks for God. And again, remember that in the Old Testament, the word prophet really doesn't mean to tell the future. The word Nabi, Nevi'im in Hebrew, is more about the one who speaks truth, the one who speaks for God. It's God's mouthpiece in the world. And in this relationship that we see between Samuel the prophet and Saul and David, and then Nathan the prophet, who challenges David when he has his affair with Bathsheba, we set up this whole history in the Old Testament of the prophet being the critique of the king. And it happens from here on out. There's only 3 kings of the united Israel. The kingdom splits in half after Solomon is king. And now there's 2 kings. There's one in the north and there's one in the south. So the prophets had lots to critique because they had lots of kings. And the books of 1st and 2nd Kings tell those stories, and they basically say, this one was a good king and that one was a bad king. And what are the two things that they mainly look at? They look at, was that king faithful to our religion? So did that king actually practice our religion? Some kings invited people, other religions into the country. That didn't go so well. And some of them kind of just did it superficially. So was this king authentically faithful to our religion and our faith? That's one critique. If they were, then he was a good king. And did he take care of the people? Many of the prophets really criticized the kings because they were powerful and mighty, and maybe they were successful at war, and maybe they claimed to follow the faith, but they were terrible to the poor. You know, they had people starving and being treated unfairly. And so that's where all these words of the Hebrew prophets talk about justice and fairness and love for those that do not have power, those that need it. So here we have the system of the way to judge whether a king is a good shepherd or not. Did they follow the faith authentically? Did they take care of the poor and the powerless? So our Jewish brothers and sisters, our rabbis would teach that there are many, many, many prophets, not just those that are written about in the Bible, those that we hear stories about, or those that we have their writings, but they would say that many prophets live their lives and they speak the voice of God, and they look around the world and they tell people when they see things that aren't quite like they should be. Maybe they never are famous for it. And others say that anyone can become a prophet if you reach a certain level of spiritual maturity. If you reach a place where you feel so close to God that you're sure that the things that you are hearing from God are things that you should share with those around you. There are prophets among us this day, I believe that. There are many shepherds as well. Surely each of us recognizes one or more people in our lives who have guided us through difficult times, perhaps while placing our needs above theirs. Each of us is called to do the same, to shepherd those we find in our care, children, friends, aging parents, colleagues, teachers, coaches, mentors, people who are in need who we may not even know. Surely you have been shepherded and experienced the challenge of being a shepherd yourself. I think the prophets give us the secret to become successful shepherds, to practice authentic faith, to become closer to God so that we know that our thoughts are the same as God's thoughts, and to show concern for those in need. If this sounds familiar, remember the words of the one who is our good shepherd. Love the Lord your God with your heart and your mind and your soul and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if your neighbor happens to win the green or the yellow or the polka dot jersey, rejoice with them and make sure that you are part of the team that made that happen. Let us pray. Lord, you are our shepherd. You give us all we need. You make us lie down in green pastures. You lead us beside still waters. You restore our soul. You guide us in the paths of righteousness. Even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with us and you comfort us. Let your goodness and your love follow us all the days of our life until we live in your presence forever. We pray this day in the name of the one who taught us to pray, our Father, who art in heaven.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory,
So a few announcements. Board meeting today after church. We'll just stay right in this space. Hopefully those of you involved can stay for that. Just this week, after over a year of trying to get an event planned for the North by Northwest churches, our church, Dearborn, Weston, Newmarket, and Smithville, the pastors have been trying to work together to plan some things. So we've, hopefully this event will work for some of our youth. Sunday, August 8th, we've got a little service project planned at Synergy Services, which is a place down in Gladstone, North Kansas City, that does work with at-risk and homeless teens. And we're going to get together and enjoy some meals and eat pizza today. So, not today, that day in a few weeks. So hopefully some of our teens can be there. The day before that day, on the Saturday the 7th, is a national kind of virtual General Assembly run by the Disciples of Christ. And we invite you to participate in that. You need to register online beforehand. So turn to our time for communion, if you will. While they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it. And when he did, he spoke these words: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam ha'motzi lachem min ha'aretz, which means, blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. He broke that bread, gave it to them, and said, take and eat. This is my body. He took a cup and he blessed it with the words, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei peri hagafen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. After giving thanks, he gave it to them and said, drink from this, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, so that their sins may be forgiven. Let's stand and sing one more time before we go. Hopefully familiar song to many of you comes from our brothers and sisters in the Catholic tradition, On Eagle's Wings. Say to the Lord, my refuge, is your shepherd, that Jesus is the good shepherd that watch and care for you. Go and do likewise to those in our world who may not know this wonderful news, that they may see the shepherd in you and experience God's love in the way that you treat your brothers and sisters. Go in peace. Watch the Tour de France. Amen.